Hello to you, Roman. Great to see you. How are you?
Hey Mehmet, yeah, nice to talk to you. I'm good. A little bit tired. It's still fairly early here in the UK, but otherwise I'm well. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really excited too. But looking forward to your presentation. We are delighted to host you, and I think the participants are very excited, like me, for your presentation. Thank you again for joining us, and the stage is yours.
Oh no, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the warm words and nice introduction. So let me share my slides with you. I have a few slides prepared. So you should now be able able to see a title slide that says tips for effectively applying the product owner role. So that's what I'd like to focus on in my talk. I don't know about you, but even though the product owner role has been widely described and has been around for at least 2 decades now, I find in my work there's still quite a bit of confusion about who is the product owner, what should the product owner do, what should the product owner not do, what do product owners have to be empowered to decide. So I'd like to share my perspective in the next about 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, and then I'm very much looking forward to your questions. So the product owner role emerged in the Scrum framework, as you probably know. And when we look at the latest version of the Scrum guide that essentially defines what Scrum is, then we find the following definition. The Scrum guide says that the product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of the product. Now, you might read this and think like, okay, so what? Well, I find it helpful to go back to basics and really look at the name product owner, this compound noun, and essentially look at the 2 parts. So, that then leads to the question, what is a product? If we have a role that is called product owner, what's that product? And for me, a product is an asset. In the context of digital products, a piece of software plus possibly additional artifacts that creates value for a group of people, users and possibly customers, and at the same time, the company that's developing and providing the product. So in other words, you could look at a product as a value creating vehicle, something that creates value, again, for users in the business. And I'd argue it largely has to do so on its own. So if that's a product, well, what does it mean then to own a product? So, what's that ownership piece? Well, for me, it means being empowered, having the authority not only to make tactical product decisions within the product backlog, but also to make strategic product decisions. And I'll say more about this in a few minutes. And if that's the case, then I think it's only fair to ask the individual who plays the role to take on responsibility for achieving product success, or as the Scrum Guide puts it, for maximizing the value that the product creates. But equally, if the individual is not adequately empowered, I think it'll be impossible to take that responsibility or even accountability. Now, it turns out that many product owners who I meet don't necessarily own a product. Some people own more and some people own less. So there are different types of ownership or different levels of ownership scope. And I thought it might be worthwhile to explore that with you briefly. So there are 6 types of owners that I find that I regularly encounter in my work. There's the Scrum product owner. And as I briefly tried to explain, a Scrum product owner should own a product in its entirety, so the whole thing. And that includes being aware of who the users are, who the customers are, if they're customers, what value the product creates for those individuals, what specific problem it addresses, or what specific benefit it provides, how the product is differentiated in the marketplace, what makes it stand out, what the specific business goals are. What any specific product goals are that might be coming up. Certainly the next product goal the Scrum team should be working on, and of course taking good care of the product backlog and therefore making detailed product decisions. So really owning that product in its entirety. But that's not the only type of ownership that I find. Sometimes, particularly when a product is rather big, large, it can be too much for a single Scrum product owner to own the entire product and manage the entire product. And then it can make sense to have other product people who own product parts, like a feature. And for me, a feature is an end-user facing capability. So if you think of an online store, maybe the ability to search for a product or to navigate towards a product, or to navigate a product category, I should probably say. Yeah. So a feature owner. And so the product owner will be responsible for maximizing the value that the overall product creates. The feature owner will be responsible for ensuring that the feature the individual looks after creates as much value as possible. Yeah. Another way to organize ownership on a larger product is to ask individuals to take on ownership for product parts in the sense of components or architecture building blocks. These might be services or microservices or collections of microservices. These might be even layers, like the data access layer, for instance. And somebody who owns an architecture building block within a product, I would refer to as a component owner. Now, quite commonly, I find that these individuals are referred to as product owners, but I do think that creates quite a bit of confusion, right? Because then we have three different types of product owners here. Somebody who actually owns the product, and two other roles who don't own the product, but only own product parts. So, you know, I'm not trying to make anybody feel uncomfortable or be judgmental in any way. It can be a very interesting and rewarding job to be a feature owner. It can be a very challenging and can be a very fascinating job to be a component owner. But individuals and the level of authority and empowerment and the skills required are a little bit different from being a Scrum product owner. So the Scrum product owner has to be aware of the underlying business model and how the product is monetized in one way or another, how the product does create value in a sustainable manner for the business. As a feature owner, that's less of my concern. And as a component owner, I probably need in-depth technical skills because the users of my component are likely to be development team members, members of other development teams. Yeah. So, you know, that goes to show the skills and the responsibility and the level of decision-making authority will vary depending on what you own, on your ownership scope. These are three roles. I've got three more. Next is the SAFe product owner. As if there wasn't enough confusion about the Scrum product owner, SAFe gave us yet another product owner role. And for me, the SAFe product owner is quite distinct from the Scrum product owner. And I'll say a few more words about how I view the distinction on the next page. A SAFe product owner owns the tactical aspects of a product. And again, I'll say more about this shortly. Now we have here two products. So it might make sense to extract shared assets into an internal software platform. And if that's something that we want to do, then we might want to regard this internal software platform as a product in its own right and have somebody who owns it. Now, I've called the role here platform owner. To be fair, it really would be a Scrum product owner. The only difference being that the platform owner here in this scenario would look after a technical product. And so similarly to the component owner requires in-depth technical skills. Again, the users of the platform assets, the interfaces, the APIs that the platform provides, in this example, would be members of the development teams who build the products that sit on top of the platform. But you know, the platform owner would be a Scrum product owner in the sense that the individual would be responsible for maximizing the value of the platform product, the platform in its entirety. So we've got two product owners in the proper sense, I would argue, and then we've got two roles who own product parts, and another role, the SAFe product owner, who owns the tactical aspects of a product. Now we've got three products, and with three products, we have a little product portfolio, a group of products, and so it might make sense to consider having somebody who manages those three products, manages that portfolio. I mean, with three products, admittedly, you know, that's very debatable. But if you assume we add a few more products, maybe 5 or 6 products, then it may make sense to have a dedicated product portfolio manager or dedicated product portfolio owner. And the individual would then be responsible for maximizing the value those products create together and help, for instance, the individual or work with the individual product owners to decide, to a certain extent, help shape strategic decisions. For instance, if a revenue generating commercial product should be revitalized and go through a life cycle extension, or accept maturity and act as a cash cow. So those are kind of decisions that a product would facilitate. So these are 6 different owner roles and types of ownership, and maybe an opportunity for some of you to reflect on the ownership scope that you have, and if there is a role here on this picture that represents the work that you do. And again, this is not meant to be judgmental. This is not meant to say this role is good and this role is bad, but simply to call out different ownership types that I regularly experience in my work. Next, I wanted to take a look at the depth of the ownership, product ownership depth, and particularly talk a little bit about the difference between the Scrum product owner and the SAFe product owner. And to do so, I'm using a simplified version of Mike Cohen's planning onion. Here, the simplified onion only has 3 layers: vision, strategy, and tactics. Now, vision would be an inspirational goal that describes the ultimate purpose for creating the product, the positive change you want to bring about. Think about healthy eating for, well, a healthy eating product. The strategy is then the path towards the vision. So that might be developing an app that helps people reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. That might be part of a strategy at least. And then the tactics will be the detailed product decisions that we take in the product backlog. For instance, the necessity to have a dashboard that allows people to track their eating behaviors, or the ability to integrate with a specific smartwatch, for instance. Yeah. Now, for me, the Scrum product owner has what I like to call full stack ownership. I really strongly believe that a Scrum product owner has to own product top to bottom. So not only look after the product backlog, not only manage the product backlog, not only refine user stories, not only work with the development team. That's part of the work of a product owner. But equally important, if not more important, is it to take care of the strategic aspects and to be clear on the value that the product creates, be clear on who the users and customers are and why people would want to use or pay for the product, be clear on why it's worthwhile for the business to invest in it, have something like a product roadmap in place that sketches the likely midterm development of the product, and maybe states the desired outcomes or product goals that you'd like to achieve. And I firmly believe that, as I said earlier, Scrum product owners must be sufficiently empowered and must have the authority to make those strategic decisions, to shape those strategic decisions in order to be able to be responsible or even accountable for maximizing the value that the product creates. Yeah, so I think it's unfair to say to people, you're responsible for the value that the product creates, but we're not going to give you the necessary ownership depth. We're not going to give you the necessary empowerment. I think that's simply unfair and unrealistic. But that's not the only way how you can deal with ownership and ownership levels. So the SAFe product owner, the role I mentioned briefly. So SAFe, by the way, I should have said that earlier, apologies, stands for Scaled Agile Framework, one of the popular Agile scaling frameworks that are available. So the SAFe product owner, that's my understanding without being a SAFe expert, owns the tactical aspects, is responsible for working on the product backlog or part of a backlog, a team backlog, and interacts with the development team, one or more development teams. So it's a much more tactical role. It's a much more inward focused role that's, in a way, you could say, removed from the end users and customers, and certainly is not empowered to make strategic product decisions, unlike, as I argued, the Scrum product owner. And so as the SAFe product owner has partial ownership, the role needs to be complemented with another role, and that role is called the SAFe product manager. So the SAFe product manager takes care of the strategic aspects, is more outward facing, interacts with users and customers, and takes care of market and market developments. You could say market research, generally speaking, and competitor research. Now, for me, that sort of terminology is a little bit unfortunate. As I said earlier, I feel that the product owner term is difficult enough, and SAFe has kind of sort of added to it by introducing a new product owner role that is distinct from the Scrum product owner. But also when you go back in the Scrum history and you look at the very first description of Scrum that's available to us, and I believe that's in an Uppsala paper Ken Schwaber authored in 1995, there is no product owner, but there's a product manager. So originally in Scrum, the product owner role was referred to as product manager, and then Ken Schwaber changed it subsequently, or in subsequent years, partly to emphasize the level of empowerment, the level of decision-making authority product people require in an agile context. And that's particularly important because we value collaboration, we value bringing on board the stakeholders, we value drawing in users and customers, at least selected users and customers. And of course, we want to collaborate with the development team members. But, you think about this, that might be potentially quite a diverse and large group of people. And if these individuals can't agree, then there has to be somebody who is empowered to take a decision so you can move on and you can run at least the next sprint and experiment with an idea and try something out. And so that's the product owner. Yeah. So for me, I've always looked at the Scrum product manager in an agile context. And for me, there's no need to have a separate product manager role. And in fact, I do recommend to my clients either to choose the term product owner or product manager, and then use with qualifying attributes, such as junior or senior product owner, junior senior product manager, and feature owner, component owner, or feature manager, but not to mix and match the manager owner role. I've worked with organizations where the product managers were desperate to become these hip agile product owners, couldn't wait. And I've worked with organizations where the product owners were equally desperate to finally grow up and become these powerful strategic product managers. So it can be quite divisive using both terms, I find. And then I thought I'll say a few words about what I consider to be the right interaction, and thereby trying to position the product owner role. So for me, the Scrum product owner a Scrum product owner should interact on a regular basis with users and customers. And my rule of is to talk to and ideally meet users and customers at least once every 3 months, once a quarter. In addition to all the user interaction data that is being collected using analytic tools. One of the big advances, yes, it must be early. I think in product management over the past 10, 15 years is the amount of data that products have available these days. It's amazing, it's brilliant. However, I can't empathize with numbers, with figures. And I think if we just look at the data, we are in danger of overlooking the most important factor. And that's the humans behind the data, right? The people who've ultimately generated the data, who've carried out the interactions with our product. So I think it's important to reach out regularly, at least to selected users and customers, and talk to them, maybe observe how they use our product or possibly a competitor product. To be able to empathize, to be able to deeply understand their needs, what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And that's not only an opportunity to further improve the product, but also just to come up with brand new ideas. I know that's not always the case, and I know that some product owners are well protected from the users. Or is it the other way around, that the users are protected from the product owners? I'm never quite sure. So sometimes you have a sales group and a support group, and maybe senior management who tell you, more about this, users just come to us, ask us, we know everything you'll ever want about those creatures. But I think it's still extremely valuable to talk directly to the users again, just to find out for yourself and be able to empathize and not having to rely on secondhand knowledge, essentially. And then the two bubbles here of the Venn diagram are the business stakeholders and the development team members or development teams. And I think as the Scrum product owner, ideally you want to provide some leadership to those individuals and create some alignment. A great way to do this is through shared goals. So for instance, through a shared product goal and shared sprint goals. And then involve those individuals not only in the tactical work and sprint review meetings, and of course into the development teams in form of product agreements, sprint planning meetings, but also on a strategic level, and have regular product strategy and road mapping workshops. So ideally, again, the Scrum product owner is a little bit like a connector, you could say, connects business stakeholders, development teams, and regularly reaches out to users and customers to understand their needs. Next, I wanted to briefly talk about right leadership. What is the type of leadership that product owners should maybe provide, and explore a little bit the relationship between three Scrum roles. Here is the Scrum product owner. Here are the developers or the development team. The name has recently changed. For those of you who are into Scrum terminology, there's the Scrum Master. And I think for decades, the idea has been that there should be a respectful and trustful between those individuals in order to facilitate collaboration, right? It's kind of hard to work together if we don't respect each other. It's hard to work together when we don't trust each other. But nevertheless, I do think that in addition to trust each other and respecting each other and collaborating and being one big Scrum team, it's important to understand what type of leadership these different roles offer and what the core responsibilities are. So for me, the Scrum product owner should offer product leadership. And by that, I mean ensuring that there is an inspiring overarching goal available that provides some fundamental alignment for stakeholders and development teams. That's the vision. That there is a product strategy available that says how we're going to attain the vision, what is our path to achieving the desired positive change, and then a product roadmap that says this is how we're going to execute the product strategy over the next, say, 12 months. And here are some specific product goals that we'd like to achieve, some specific product outcomes. Is actively involved in working on the product backlog and prioritizes the product backlog, orders the product backlog, and collaborates with the stakeholders and pulls the stakeholders into the Scrum process, but also ensures that stakeholders contribute in the right way to strategic product decisions. The development team, the developers for me, should offer design technology leadership and have to be empowered to take that on and make the appropriate decisions. And that includes user experience design for end user facing products in my mind. It includes all the development decisions, including architecture, technology decisions, and quality assurance testing, and self-organization or self-management. So that includes dealing with issues, with conflicts, deciding how much work can be done in a sprint, who does what, how do the team members collaborate. And then there's some shared responsibilities between the product owner and the development team that are worthwhile highlighting. User research, I think it's very healthy, can be very beneficial to involve development team members in the user research, in reaching out to users, and observing users, interviewing users, talking to users, of course also then to see how users respond to new product increments. Sprint goal selection is something that should always happen together, product owner and development team members. There should be an agreement, and the development team members should really, should be a shared goal, and the development team members should really agree with the goal, should be happy with the goal. I guess that's the word I was looking for. And then, as I've already briefly mentioned, development team members should actively participate in the product backlog refinement. Now, it was important for me to mention this again, because I sometimes hear product owners who tell me that their development team members expect that they're being fed with detailed, beautiful, perfect user stories. And while I do think that it's good that the product owner does spend sufficient time working on the product backlog, I equally find that it's really important that the development team members contribute. I think that increases the chances of having a clear product backlog items, clear user stories. It makes it easier to get the size of the user stories right. It leverages the knowledge and creativity of the development team. And essentially, you co-create the product backlog content. And so it then leads to a different level of motivation, and it leads to shared ownership of the product backlog, essentially, between the Scrum product owner and the development team members. So something I really encourage. So if you're a product owner and your development team members say, like, look, you write the user stories, we implement them, then I think you need to sit together in the next sprint retrospective and talk about it, because I think there's a misunderstanding how things should work in an agile context. And then finally, the Scrum Master is there to provide process and people leadership in my mind. And that means not only to offer process and method coaching to the development team and the product owner, but also to the wider organization, to the stakeholders, helping with collaboration and acting as an organizational change agent. That means helping people to make the necessary changes in order to be able to leverage Scrum and Agile way of working as a business, as an organization. And again, a common mistake I see is that Scrum product owners lack Scrum Masters, or Scrum Masters not adequately available or qualified, and then it's kind of natural to take on some of the Scrum Master responsibilities. And if that happens for a short period of time, then that's cool. But on a longer term basis, I think it's a bad setup. It will be a bad solution. Being a Scrum product owner is a challenging job. There's lots to it. It's demanding, and then taking on additional responsibility just makes the role completely unsustainable. And so you're likely then to neglect some of your core product management responsibilities, or you're gonna get completely overworked and suffer the consequences, which neither is desirable. Sorry, I'm just looking at the time. I think I've spoken now for 26 minutes. So I've got probably a little bit more time just to share one more slide with you to elaborate on the thought that being a product owner is a challenging and demanding job because it requires a number of different skills. And I like to divide these skills into three sets. And so for me, a competent Scrum product owner has the right hard skills, and I like to divide them into tactical skills and strategic skills. So tactical skills, again, have to do with the product backlog, being able to prioritize, stock a product backlog, prioritize a product backlog, update the product backlog, maybe write user stories, maybe write personas or work with user models, progressively refining product backlog items. Strategic skills are then about carrying out product discovery and strategizing work, doing some user and market research, knowing about product strategy, knowing about product road mapping practices, knowing about how to describe a business model and maybe create a financial forecast, and being aware of the product lifecycle model and how you can leverage that in order to proactively manage your products. But then the leadership skills, I find these are the people skills, the interpersonal skills, are just as important as the hard skills. I mean, it's called product owner and it's called product management, but so much of what we do as product people is about, dealing with other people, interacting with people, and collaborating with people. So leadership skills like being able to build trust, being able to actively listen to individuals, being able to make decisions as a group, collaborative decision making, being able to deal with disagreement, friction, and conflict in a constructive manner, maybe being able to negotiate if that's required. So for me, these are core skills that product people and Scrum product owners should develop and should strengthen. And again, I find that as important as the strategic and tactical skills. So it's a broad skill set, and that means that becoming a Scrum product owner is not something that happens overnight. It's something that usually doesn't happen within a 2-day or 3-day training course, but it takes months, and in many cases, it takes years. I've been in product management now for over 20 years, and I'm still learning, and there's still little gaps that I have in my knowledge. So, it's a very broad, it's a very diverse, very fascinating field. But again, it takes time, it takes dedication to develop the right skills and to deepen them, to hone them. So to summarize, be clear on what you own. Is it a product, or maybe is it a feature or component, or possibly more a group of products? And do you have full stack ownership, or do you own mainly the tactical aspects of your product? And then no matter how we look at the product owner role and which product owner role we talk about, for me, it belongs to in the product management realm. It's a product management role and requires the appropriate product management skills. And finally, as I've mentioned before, I strongly feel that Scrum product owners must be sufficiently empowered to succeed in their job and maximize the value their products create. Otherwise, it's just very, very hard to play the role well. So I hope that my thoughts were helpful for you. Thank you for your attention. You can find more information on the product owner role and product ownership on my website and in my books. My latest book, How to Lead in Product Management, talks particularly about the soft skills that I mentioned, so things like active listening and effectively communicating with stakeholders and development teams, or collaborative decision making. And then I'm very much looking forward to your questions now, but if for whatever reason your question doesn't get answered, or you've got a follow-up question, then don't be shy and reach out to me, drop me an email. So thank you again for your attention. And I think I'm ending the slideshow for now, the share.
We are here. Hello there, guys. Roman, for this enlightening presentation. We are grateful for your efforts. And there are so many comments from our participants. I'm now looking at them. So here is our first question. So much owner roles means others do not own these aspects. Does this harm collective ownership?
Yeah, nice question. So for me, there is the thoughts that we'd like to encourage teamwork, and we'd like to encourage team ownership or collective ownership. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be clear roles and responsibilities. So personally, I believe it's hard for people, generally speaking, to collaborate successfully on a sustained basis if it's not clear who does what. So in fact, you know, I tend to one of the first things that I tend to ask when I engage with a new team is, what are the roles and what are the product roles, and are they clearly understood? Have they been maybe described? And again, for me, that doesn't negate that people work closely together and that there's a feeling of we're all in this together, and ultimately we're all responsible for this, and ultimately we all own this product. So, you know, personally, you know, I hear this concern, you know, on a regular basis, and I think I sort of can relate to it to a certain extent. But for me, if you play things right, it really shouldn't materialize. You know, I think, again, you know, you can have clear roles and responsibilities and still encourage a sense of shared collective ownership.
Yeah, perfect. Now let's move to next question. Our participant asked, how will we place product owners, especially component and feature owners, in Scrum team rituals?
Yes, nice question. So I guess that's related to how you scale. And I'm not necessarily a scaling expert. Different scaling frameworks available. SAFe is one of them that I mentioned, or LESS would be another one. So for me, when you have a larger product and you have one overarching Scrum product owner, and you have maybe 4 or 5 feature owners, the feature owners would then largely interact with the development teams, would work with feature team members and the overarching overall product owner to do the product backlog work, do product backlog refinement. But the other feature owners would then engage more with the teams in the sprint planning meeting, answer questions that might arise during the sprint, and then also review the feature increments, so to speak, the deliverables that are available at the end of the sprint. So ultimately, it's really finding a way that the product owner and the feature owners engage together and work together in the Scrum ceremonies, but then also on a strategic level in product strategy workshops. And I think it's important for the feature owners and for component owners to be involved in that work too. So that, you know, it's not only the overall product owner who makes all the strategic decisions, but that these decisions are shared, that feature owners, component owners can contribute to them, and equally that the overall product owner does engage sufficiently in the product backlog work and is present, certainly, you know, in the sprint planning meeting, at least at the beginning, and certainly present at the sprint review meeting.
Yeah, and I think the key point here is the engagement, as you said, Roman, especially in the COVID times, right? Now,
That's right.
Move on. Yeah. Now let's move on to next question. Our participant asked, isn't it confusing to use different roles for product ownership in the same company?
I don't know. So personally, for me, I think that's something you need to decide for yourself. For me, I find it more confusing if, you know, there's a role called product owner, and then when I talk to people, one product owner owns a product, another product owner owns a feature, another product owner owns an architecture building block, and another product owner actually owns a collection of products. It's like, wow, you're all called product owners, but you own very different things. Therefore, you need different skills. You have different responsibilities and different levels of decision-making authority. So for me, that is confusing, I have to say. So I prefer bringing clarity to the product roles. And I've changed my mind on this. When you take a look at my book, Agile Product Management with Scrum, you'll find some thoughts on scaling and a product owner hierarchy, lots of product owners and a chief product owner at the top. That's not necessarily something I would teach these days. I would recommend these days. These days I would say, look, just call out specifically what people own. If somebody owns a platform, call it a platform owner. If somebody owns the search feature, call it the search owner. If somebody owns the overall online retail store, the online retail store owner, or whatever it might be. And again, just try and be communicate clearly what it is that people own. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, perfect. Now let's move on to our last question, Roman. It is similar with the previous one. Isn't it possible that adding so many roles to the organization will slow down the processes and cause us to lose in terms of agility? What do you think?
So I think whenever you scale up, whenever you need more people to work on a product, or whenever you have a big product where it's impossible that one product owner, one person can own or manage the entire product, you will slow things down. It's unavoidable, and there will be a certain specialization in the roles that you use. That's at least my experience. And so then the question is, how can you organize yourselves? How can you organize your products? How can you organize your work that you have to scale as little as possible? And one way to do this is to break up bigger products into smaller products, which is a technique called unbundling, where you take a feature and you spin it off, you break it out, you unbundle it into a separate product. I think that's something Facebook did quite a few years ago now with Messenger. Was that 5-6 years ago when Facebook unbundled the messenger functionality from its main mobile app into a separate standalone app? So that would be an example of how you can essentially descale, right? How you can break up an existing bigger product and turn it into several smaller products. And so then you have a dedicated, say, Facebook mobile app owner, and you have a dedicated Messenger app owner, and need fewer development teams to develop those two products. So that's something I'd encourage you to consider. But if you have a big product and it's one cohesive product and you cannot, or you don't want to break it up, then you often need more product people, and that again adds some overhead, because you have additional collaboration. You need more people in meetings. These meetings take a little bit longer. It takes a little bit longer to make shared decisions. I guess that's just the downside of scaling up, as I said earlier.
Yeah, I think scaling is important, but also descaling is also important, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the challenge for many existing organizations is that there's quite a bit of complexity, and there's quite a bit of structure and processes. And then when you embrace agile practices, you kind of assume the same level of complexity and the same level of processes should exist in an agile space, but that's not true. A fundamental idea of agile ways of working is to simplify, to move fast, and try things out very quickly. And so, a good technique is to create these autonomous, self-contained, loosely coupled teams that own their products, own their assets, and can experiment, are empowered to experiment, are empowered to try things out and move their products forward, progress them quickly.
Great. Thank you, Roman. It was very inspiring.
Thank you.